Times, which is our independent brewery media channel to combat the misinformation of our day. We do these office hours every week, typically with our writers, but I've brought on retired Army Colonel George Mason a number of times because he spent 30 years in the Army and he knows so much about not only foreign foreign policy, what's happening around the world, given what his career, and he knows a ton about, and he's learning a ton about election protection in Wisconsin. So, Mason, thank you so much for joining us again.
Hey, brother. Thanks. Appreciate the opportunity to get to talk about some of the things that matter to all of us. Um, Elections, current state of where we're at in these conflicts we're involved in. Some aspects of our future military budget that's being pushed, and the impact of all of this on the United States of America. But I'd like Kirk to talk about what the Wisconsin Committee of Safety is doing right now, what we did on the 7th, and kind of a little bit of the way forward, just briefly before we shift to international relations and the U.S. role in the global security world.
Yep. So you mentioned this Wisconsin Committee of Safety, and we've been on Substack before talking about it. This is your organization that you started to specifically to protect our elections this coming November, because Trump and the Trump regime has consistently have foreshadowed that they will make elections very difficult and chaotic and potentially unfair and illegal coming November. So briefly, tell us again what the organization is and what your goals are.
So the Wisconsin Committee of Safety is a 501(c) nonprofit, and that information is available on our Facebook page. We formed ourselves predominantly veterans, but we will involve any concerned citizen, regardless of whether or not they served. Our tent wants to be the largest possible, but our function in life is currently right now, and our focus is to preserve the integrity of our November midterm elections from any possible interference by the federal government, by federal agents, whether they be under DHS, which means ICE, CBP, and HSI, or whether it might be active duty troops, or whether it might be National Guard soldiers placed on Title 10 U.S. Code 12406 orders in an active duty federal status to police our polling areas or potentially disrupt our elections. So that's our number one focus.
Yeah. So you formed the organization. I know, and we had a drink together after Tuesday's landslide victory for Democrats across the state of Wisconsin. But obviously, in order to prepare for November's elections, you need to think about what's going on when we have other statewide elections. So you were out, and then many of your members were out. Watching the elections, observing, kind of understanding how it all happens to prepare more for November. So tell us what you experienced last Tuesday on Election Day in Wisconsin.
Yeah, perfect. So I'm going to define many. We are small and we just started. We've really been in existence only for a month. So there were 4 of us out from the Wisconsin Committee of Safety in Madison and Milwaukee. So overall, I just want to lay this out. I am amazed at the quality of our poll workers in this state. They are incredible. I observed only one significant issue in the 3 locations that we were monitoring, and that was an absentee ballot that had been marked using marker instead of pen. And I personally observed the poll workers cure that ballot and then resubmit it. They had me plugged in for the entire thing from start to finish. I spent 13 hours, um, and I did not see a single instance where a citizen of Wisconsin's vote was not registered and cast. The same thing from our folks who were down in Milwaukee. Milwaukee had 4 polling locations that opened late due to the Milwaukee public school system changing some of their access codes to buildings. Um, but it was 40 minutes late in one case and near that in 3 others. Um, but that was really it. I mean, think about that. We had hundreds of thousands of people voting across the state of Wisconsin, and our 2 major metro areas had no real issues. So this narrative that the Republicans are spinning about how our elections are not safe, I I I would have to try really hard to game the system. Um, and I'm now a trained election observer um, through 2 different venues, and all our folks will be trained. But I do want to talk about Green Bay.
Yep.
Because Van Orden posted something. So, for those of you watching, 152 duplicate mail in ballots were sent out by the city clerk of Green Bay. Out of 152, one person cast both ballots. And in that case, that person was identified. Both ballots were destroyed and they cast another ballot in person. So this regressive attack, assault on our election system, its nodes, from ballot boxes to polling places to central counting locations, municipal clerks, county clerks, and then the state WEC. That narrative is complete garbage.
Yeah.
But I still see, and on our Wisconsin Committee of Safety site, I have people posting stuff in response to our posts talking about duffel bags full of ballots and
Mhm.
windows covered up during counts, etc. I'm just going to tell anybody, if there's anyone out there who's a regressive watching this and you think you're going to like come mess with us on my page, I'm just going to block you
Mhm.
because I will not tolerate conspiracy theories and nonsense on our page. Our page is founded on reason, logic, and rational thought. So anyway, fantastic election overall in terms of election security. But
Mhm.
once again, we have the regressives trying to cast this narrative that it was something else.
Got it. And for we got a lot of people outside of Wisconsin who might Derek Van Orden is probably the biggest MAGA. Well, it's hard to say biggest. We got a lot of got a lot of Looney Tunes in Wisconsin, but he's the most at risk Republican congressman in Wisconsin right now because he's in the swingiest of swing districts on the western side, and so he's been known to 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 spew nonsense and conspiracy theories like many of the MAGA folk around the country. So he said that something was going on in Green Bay. George just kind of made sure that our audience knows that absolutely nothing happened in this election. So George, um, let us tell us what you're talking about. Everything went great this time around because nothing was really at stake. The Supreme Court already had a 4-3 progressive majority. That wasn't going to change because we had a Republican Supreme Court justice leaving, Annette Ziegler, I believe her name was, and so this was an election for a seat of a conservative justice. So this wasn't going to change and anything this time. And so, but the stakes are going to be much higher, obviously, in November. We have an opportunity to, and it looks by all polling and by all trend watching, it looks like it's going to be a bloodbath for Republicans in November. That the House will the majority will go back to Democrats. People are saying now that the majority might even go back in the Senate as well, and so there is every reason to believe, and Trump has indicated, and Bannon has indicated, Steve Bannon has indicated that they're going to put they're going to put troops in ballot locations or ICE agents, and ostensibly, intimidate voters with armed troops, agents that could hopefully, in their minds, swing elections back their way. Tell us what you fear and what you want your group and others in the election protection space to do that day.
Yeah. So first, some people might get a kick out of this. So I go by Mason, and on every podcast where Kirk calls me George, he has to pay me $10. So we're up to $170 now, Kirk.
I got some wine for you when we went out after the election, and
Oh,
you
oh
had been out in the
no,
cold all day. So
that
I think does that work? Can I can
that
I
does
can I
not count.
go
No.
against my bill from that?
Cash transaction or donation to the Wisconsin Committee of Safety. Either is acceptable. Okay, so for those of you watching, I really need you to go to the Facebook page for the Wisconsin Committee of Safety. So you have the background against what Kirk just mentioned. We sent a letter. Um, our board of directors um, sent a letter to Governor Evers on the 3rd of April. And that letter asks for him to take some specific actions to secure our November midterms from any federal interference. And I'm not going to read the letter, but I need you to go to our Facebook page and read that letter. It is pinned at the top of the page, so it'll be the first thing you see. Um, we have had an incredible response to those suggestions, which, range from trying to get the legislature to pass a law preventing um, any interference with our elections by the federal government. New Mexico just passed a similar law, all the way to preparing a legal defense for Governor Evers to refuse any request from the president and the Department of Defense to mobilize Wisconsin National Guard personnel in support of Title 10, 12406, federal mobilization if the conditions of that law have not been met. And to date, in every instance where the federal government has used that law to mobilize National Guard soldiers, those conditions have not been met. Um, so we published that letter. Our organization will be out on the streets on August 11th as a rehearsal. We will be out on the streets on November 3rd, and we will have mobile observation teams monitoring likely federal installations and facilities to determine if there are any presence of DHS agents from any one of those three sub-organizations, or the presence of any military personnel, whether they be active duty or National Guard on active duty orders. So we are in the process of working with a couple other groups. So we're sharing information to identify all of those likely federal installations that might be used. We will have other mobile teams roving around polling places to observe and determine if there are any problems. But what we're really trying to do is um, get plugged into the Wisconsin coalition of voting rights security groups, so we can establish those communications back and forth. So if there's an area we are not covering, they can let us know, and then we can get a mobile team there quickly um, to, number one, inform the voters of their rights, inform any federal agents that they are violating Title 18 U.S. Code 592 and 593, and to ensure that local law enforcement is aware and state law enforcement is aware that Title 18 U.S. Code 592 and 593 are being violated in our state.
Yep.
Um, so we are a non-violent group composed of veterans predominantly. But that is our job, is to observe, report, monitor, and then make sure that the media knows and that law enforcement knows about what's going on predominantly in the streets of our major cities or in districts where we have a high profile race that might garner that level of attention.
So the areas that we expect uh, will garner that level of attention. So the third congressional district of Wisconsin is the western part of Wisconsin, and there are three predominantly blue cities in those. So where most of the Democrats are going to come from is going to be Stevens Point, Eau Claire, and La Crosse in the third congressional district. And so if Trump wants to mess with the vote and intimidate voters, then those three cities look like they might be likely targets. Similarly, we with such a swing towards Democrats in the Supreme Court race. It looks like the first congressional district, which is Bryan Style, which consists of Racine, Kenosha, Janesville, and Beloit. That district is is tight, is tighter than it's ever been, and so those cities might be cities. Cities are obviously where most of the Democrats live. Rural Wisconsin leans heavily Republican, so those cities are ones that are going to have to be monitored, and then as well as districts in Madison and Milwaukee that are that are Latino or have people of color who are typically afraid of law enforcement. Obviously, if they see law enforcement there with guns, or Latino community sees ICE agents there with guns, they know they the last 2 years have happened in front of them, and so that will it'll scare everybody, and it will hurt voter turnout. So those are the areas that we really have to be worried about in Wisconsin, and it takes the planning. It takes many organizations, but George, because he's got veterans on his side, like mobile command units going around observing is not something that's foreign to these guys. Where it would be to me, I'd be like, what the heck are we doing? You know, so that's why it's great, because you've already done this, and you've done it under an America that generally was the good guys and not the bad guys. And so you're doing it with heart and soul, and with and honoring what this country's all about.
So, a couple things. I will say this about this whole concept and what we've seen with ICE and CBP to date. So I spent time in Chicago, Broadview, and out at the Reserve Center and Little Village. I spent time up in Minneapolis, um, in those affected areas, and our veterans are committed to doing this because they swore an oath that not one of us will ever walk away from.
Yeah.
But I'm going to say this about the young people leading the resistance in Chicago and Minneapolis. They are incredible. And what they have learned and created over the last year is unbelievable. So that's another area. We want to make sure that we are plugged in with those young people who are going to be doing this as well because they will be out. They know the risks. Um, Fantastic young Americans who are protecting their communities, and we are all about being a backstop and maybe a resource for them if they need reinforcements or some other form on the ground. Uh, you
Great.
want to
It's good.
shift, Kirk?
Yeah, it's good to, obviously, one group versus another. We're all in this together, and hopefully, everyone's specific talents can help elevate the whole. Um, okay, George. So we spent about 20 minutes talking about election protection. It would be remiss every time I have you on to not talk about the world as a whole, because you spent so much of your career kind of abroad and in strategizing about what the U.S. military needs to do to make sure all hell doesn't break loose throughout the globe. So remind everybody of some of the stuff, what you did in your career to make you kind of acutely aware of what's happening right now in the Iran war and even Venezuela, whatnot.
So, 38 years total service. 26 and a half years of that was active duty. I am very proud of the fact that I got to serve in the Wisconsin National Guard in the 32nd Infantry Brigade for a while. Um, but positions ranging from squad leader, infantry squad leader, platoon leader, company commander, all the way up to working in the Pentagon, multiple 4-star commands in the Army. Uh, it is it's rare to have an officer who has multiple branches and is also foreign area officer qualified, which I am as well, for Central America and sub-Saharan Africa. Um, Deployments, but everybody's got that T-shirt who's been in as long as I have. But I want to talk briefly about where we're at with Iran, not not what the president's saying. I want to talk about the impact on the United States long term with respect to our past allies. And you notice the word I used, past allies.
Mhm.
Um, NATO is not going to dissolve, but hopefully everybody who's watching is familiar with the term quiet quitting. So the EU brand new commissioner for defense and space gave a speech about 4 months ago. And in that speech, he outlined the European Union's position. And it's very simple, blunt, and straightforward. So, quote, Europe up, Russia down, America out, Ukraine in. That's it. That's their strategy. Brilliant in its simplicity.
Mhm.
But what that means for the United States of America is this is a whole new security realm that we are now in. France just told us that they're not interested in really any form of cooperation. Um, we have in the past sold a lot of military hardware to NATO members and non-NATO members in Europe. Those days are over. The F-35 program, those nations who have signed up for it and have a firm commitment will fulfill their commitment because they have to. There won't be any additional buys. Um, and I suspect that future NATO exercises as the European Union builds its own defense infrastructure and system, NATO will become less and less important to them, and they will just slowly kind of withdraw from exercises and conferences and things of that nature. They're not going to punch us in the nose, but they're disinterested in in the United States of America in the future with us because, and it's not just Trump, every one of those leaders, nations, and military leaders, and I worked in U.S. Army Europe headquarters for 2 years. I'm well familiar, and I've deployed with a lot of our NATO member nations. They know they can't trust Trump, but bigger than that, they know they cannot trust the American voter to provide them with any form of future stability. This is not a temporary thing. This is a sea change
Mhm.
in how the European nations view the United States and collective security. So I believe NATO is a dead organization walking.
Yep.
But it's not just NATO. NORAD has been around since post World War II, 1950s. I can't remember the exact year. For
Give us that, acronym again.
so NORAD is the North American. Oh my, I'm blowing it. Regional Air Defense uh, uh, Command.
Yep.
So
So
uh,
it's us in Canada, right?
it's us in Canada.
Yeah.
And I spent 3 years at U.S. Northern Command and NORAD in Peterson Air Force Base, Colorado, as the chief of force management, getting all the force structure for NORAD. And my boss was a Canadian 2-star general. The same thing applies. Uh, we are going to witness the Canadians quiet quitting. They will also fulfill their F-35 contracts and some other ones, but they are already looking at the Gripen fighter and looking at getting licensing to produce that uh, excellent fighter aircraft in Canada. So everybody, like the American citizens, need to understand we are in a new place. Our dominance in the security arrangements globally have drastically changed, and they are not coming back
Yeah.
because they can't trust us.
Yeah. And cooperation like that, uh, that's how we stop the next 9/11 from happening, right? I mean, so tell us a little bit about the communication involved when countries stop working with us. We're flying blind because we can only rely on our own people and not on 15 other nations who we've signed a treaty pact with, right?
So the intel sharing is drying up because it was demonstrated by Ukraine that the U.S. was passing information to Russia.
Wow.
And Ukraine and France set up a little sting. Uh, and sure enough, so nobody trusts us with any form of sensitive information. So that intel sharing has for the most part dried up. I don't think that would extend to a potential terrorist threat. I think that's still always going to be on the table. Just any responsible nation would do that to help another nation out.
Yeah.
Um, but anything significant that involves another nation's security is not going to be shared with the United States because once again we cannot be trusted. So Kirk, I want to talk about Iran real quick. Um,
Yep.
so I'm not going to focus on the tactical or operational details, but I want to make sure everyone in the audience understands something. Um, I spent a year at Harvard as a national security fellow studying global energy policy. Um, and a lot of our audience right now probably does not understand that virtually every global trade deal involving oil currently uses US dollars. The name for the US dollar in the oil trading industry is the petrodollar. So almost every single transaction across the planet That benefits the United States of America because those countries, those nations that trade in oil have to have US dollars in order to do so. So Iran, when they initially opened up the straits and established a toll system, made this perfectly clear. They said they would prefer yuan or EU dollars.
Wild.
Okay. So there's a reason they did that. There have been nations who have been calling for the end of the petrodollar for decades. And it is looking like that now is something much more on the table than it ever was. Um, so the damage that will be done to the U.S. economy, people cannot fathom what this will mean.
Does it mean like because for us to borrow money, other countries have to buy dollars from us. That's why we're in debt to China because we have this trade deficit. But it just you actually have to hold on to our dollars. So if other countries don't have to use our dollars to buy oil, then our ability to get countries to lend money to us could dry up or significantly decrease. Is that what you're saying?
You are absolutely correct, and we're seeing that as an impact of all of the policies of the Trump regressive Trump regime over the last 15 months. We saw it with the tariffs, trade deals blowing up. Um, Foreign countries are not buying our debt; they don't want it. France just cashed in all their gold,
Hmm.
very unobtrusively and quietly. Um, but France no longer holds any U.S. gold, and they made a massive profit in the process. So other countries will be influenced to do the same. The point I want to make, so that everybody understands, is that the place of the United States on the global stage is drastically different, and it is drastically reduced. And we have reached a point in time where, with all the back and forth and the tariff this week, tariff next week, no tariff, tariff again, uh, negotiation, yes, no, okay, I'll give you 2 days, I'll give you 10 days, I'll give you 2 weeks. Um, that has destroyed the United States credibility globally,
Mhm.
and they're done. The other nations of the world are done. They are out of patience.
Yeah.
And we're not going to recover that without a hell of a lot of hard work
Mhm.
by some really intelligent, dedicated, and committed leaders. And we don't have that right now.
Mhm.
And we're not going to have it until 2029 at the earliest.
Yeah.
So I just want everybody to be aware the impact of all of these things has been to destroy the United States' place on the global stage. We're not going to see UN votes in our favor in the future. We're not going to see a lot of things, and nobody wants to cut a trade deal with us.
Yeah.
Um,
Go on.
okay. Do we want to talk about military budget?
I no, we it's about we got 35. I think we'll save that for the next time there, George. But man, what a every half hour I spend with you, I learn lots more than I learned before. Unfortunately, today's news wasn't very positive, but so happy that you're here in Wisconsin. I'm so happy that you are thinking about our elections, which we started this half hour on, and that's the most important thing. And thanks for keeping us abreast of our place in on the global stage, which is greatly diminished. Thanks, George.
Thanks, Kirk. Our followers are awesome. Um, People of Wisconsin are awesome. And thanks for all your support, Kirk.
All
we'll
right.
we'll keep everybody updated on what the Wisconsin Committee of Safety is doing.
All right. See you later, man. Bye.
Okay, out here.